And I'll put it in the email that at some point that interview will be posted, and you'll just see how brilliant your teachers are. So, we're in I think it's our 10th or 11th week of our Truth to Happiness Dhamma study. This week we're looking at hindrances. We had one class on this past Saturday. I'm going to continue from that class, but continue where I left off. But you'll notice that the first 9 weeks of our study were about what is the Dhamma? What does it look like? What's the meaning behind it? And now we get into karma and rebirth, and these teachings on the hindrances are really teachings on what Dhamma practice looks like, what it feels like, how do we actually do it? And so looking at karma and rebirth like we did 2 weeks ago and how it relates to the Dhamma, we learned that karma and rebirth aren't some type of speculative theories about how reward and punishment happen in the world for us. In other words, that we get something, it's because of good karma, and something bad happens, a safe falls on our head, or we get the coronavirus, that's because of bad karma. It has nothing to do with karma or rebirth. We understand from developing a proper understanding of karma and rebirth that they point directly to where Dhamma is practiced, meaning right here, right now. Karma is about what's arising in this moment. Either, and my experience with that is either conditioned by my mind rooted in ignorance, or I'm seeing things clearly, rooted in right view, developed through the Eightfold Path. And that informs what I'm giving birth to in this moment. So the practical nature of the Buddha's Dhamma and where the Buddha's Dhamma is practiced is right here and right now. And so the reason why we cannot practice the Dhamma right here, right now, both on our cushions in that immediate setting or off our cushions in our moment-by-moment life, is because of these 5 hindrances. And if you think about your own Dhamma practice and your own struggles and the things that seem to be barriers or the things that you had to overcome to keep your Dhamma practice vibrant or at least continuing, as infinite as those blocks seem to be, or the obstacles seem to be, when you look at them clearly, they can be boiled down to these 5. And it's this brilliance. This is one of those teachings that when I think about how Siddhartha developed these, it just shows me how brilliant he is, that could take something as incredibly complex as a human being's mind, and then the complexities that that human being added to that mind. And he's able to develop this simple and direct path to recognize and abandon all those fabricated views as long as we can overcome these 5 hindrances. And so I'm going to start where I left off, but just going back to remind everyone what these hindrances are that we're talking about all the time, beginning with a sensory or sensual desire. Ill will is the second. The third is sloth, torpor, or drowsiness. Indifference to the world is the same thing. Laziness and procrastination is all part of that third hindrance. Restlessness and worry is the 4th hindrance. Doubt and uncertainty or skepticism is the 5th. That last one is interesting. Well, they're all interesting to me. That one particularly so because for many years I was in a very, very well-known and well-established Zen tradition, and again, I always qualify as saying I'm not putting that tradition down or that particular teacher who I won't mention, but he is known for saying and teaching this way. Is the catchphrase was it cultivate? It was either embrace your doubt, and sometimes he would say, and often he would say, cultivate doubt, meaning they made doubt the central figure of their so-called Zen practice. And we do that when we don't know what the practice is. Again, I'm not putting that down, but the problem that blocks most people is doubt. And when you make what's blocking you from developing the Dhamma the central theme of your Dhamma, then you're distracted towards the thing that's distracting you in your first place. Are you following me? No, it's rather confusing when you look at it this way because it's so circular. But what I'm saying is we substitute the problem that keeps us away from Dhamma practice as our Dhamma practice. And it's reflected in modern phrases like embrace your doubt, or embrace your suffering, embrace your pain, embrace your inner you, embrace your inner child. All of that is putting a fabricated focus on something that is fabricated in the first place. And it's all part of these 5 hindrances. So I hope I made that clear. Is anybody unclear about what I just said? Unmute your mic and tell me, because it really is a key teaching. Okay.
John, it's
yes.
Lorna.
Thank you.
Can you just go over that again, please?
Yes, and let me say it a slightly different way. I focused on the idea of doubt and made an example of that. But if you look at each and every one of these hindrances, people make a so-called Dharma practice over each and every one of these. In other words, some people will teach that in order to get over your sensual desire, you should just give into it. And eventually you'll tire yourself of all the things that you're dumping into your body, of all the experiences. Say you're compulsive about movies, so you go to 10 movies a day every day, and the idea is that you do that long enough, you're going to overcome sensual desire. You won't. You'll get bored, and you'll substitute something else. You'll substitute maybe heroin because cocaine is now boring, or you might go from beer to scotch like drug addicts do, or you might go from 1 cake to 5 cakes, or you might human beings find an infinite list of things to distract them, and they're all rooted in these hindrances. So we create practices over them. I hope I'm answering this question well enough, Lorna. The using that emphasis on setting doubt as your Dhamma practice, because you're taught to do that. Now you spend the rest of your life, every time doubt comes up, you start analyzing the doubt and where it came from. And to that mind, it feels like now I'm engaged in Dharma practice. There's some value in embracing my doubt, or embracing my pain, or embracing my sensuality, or embracing my ill will. But all it is a constant distraction, now made a Dharma practice because of the label it's given, rather than recognize the fabricated nature of each and every one of these and simply abandoning them. In other words, if I'm full of doubt in this moment about the Dhamma or about what's going to happen in the next moment, it's because my mind is rooted in ignorance. If I'm giving preference to me not knowing, and also putting it on myself that I must know, or else I can't be comfortable in this moment, I can't be content, I can't be in my body, I've placed a condition on my own life. What the Buddha teaches us is, guess what? You don't know, but here's the way to know it. And he gave us a clear and direct path. So we don't have to analyze everything. We don't have to get into further speculation about what sensuality or doubt or ill will is. We know what it is. All we have to do is recognize it as a hindrance and let it go. We don't make a practice over things that have nothing to do as in Dhamma practice. Does that help, Lorna?
John, the same thing as, like, say, like emotions or something like that come up.
Right. Yeah. Say it again, please.
So the same thing you said, like with something like emotions or something like that, you would make that the focus of your practice to try to get rid of that or something like that. You would just put them aside and come back to your breath.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say put it aside, but that's really is what's encouraged today, isn't it? That you should analyze your feelings and analyze. An emotion is a thought attached to a feeling, isn't it? It's a judgment of a feeling. So it's already, if we're in an emotional state, if we've already attached a thought to a feeling, it means that we've already further fabricated the feeling. So there can't possibly be any value in going down that hole, could there? But what's important is to recognize that I've done it, not judge myself, treat myself with great gentleness, recognize that I'm seeking a further fabrication in order to continue my own ignorance, simply abandon it. And from a mind that is trained in our society almost from birth to analyze your feelings and talk about your feelings and express your feelings and make the world responsible for our feelings, it's very difficult to do at first, isn't it? But when we start doing it, the immediate benefit of it becomes apparent, and then we take to it wholeheartedly. We stop playing games with ourselves. We stop picking at our own scabs, and we simply abandon what is no longer useful to us. And that's the great benefit of these teachings, because they're so simple and they're so focused. We'll remember that Siddhartha said, let's not go there. Let's unite my mind and my body and stop beating the hell out of myself. Let me continue.
Hey, John? John?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Just one question.
Please.
So in relation to the aggregates, the hindrances, would you classify them as consciousness or fabrications?
Well, they're both, Michael. It's a good question. Consciousness is an aspect of impermanence. In other words, a mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths can change. It's an impermanent state. It's not something that, it's not a life or death sentence, is it? But so consciousness refers to whatever the quality of mind is. In an unawakened human being, consciousness simply refers to ongoing thinking rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. The reason for the distinction is we all been influenced by New Age thought, which began long before the mamas and the papas. It began a long time ago. And one of the defining tenets of most New Age philosophical ideas, again, going back to the Greeks and the Romans, was this idea of a universal mind, consciousness with a big C. The Buddha looked at that too. We've talked about this, and he rejected that as it has to be out of hand. There's no way that type of one mind universal consciousness can relate at all to impermanence or Four Noble Truths. So to get back to your question, what consciousness are we talking about? Awakened consciousness or unawakened consciousness? And then as that relates to the five clinging aggregates, and we talked about this last week, the five clinging aggregates are simply the ongoing definition of individual suffering. So someone who is still a five clinging aggregate person is still someone who is governed by their hindrances. A person who is awakened is simply a person with five aggregates, but they're not. Remember we talked about this. They're not clinging anymore. They're just impersonal aspects of every human being. Does that bring a little more clarity to that, Michael?
Yeah, it does. But can I just say a little bit more about that? So then,
sure.
Being the way you had just described them, then I would think then that they go through the same process of they're void and without substance, and therefore go through the same process of fermentation that the aggregates do. So they basically.
Wait, no, I'm going to interrupt you. When you're saying they, who are you referring to?
I was referring to the hindrances.
Oh, okay. It wasn't. I just wasn't sure if we were talking about the hindrances or an individual person. So.
No, it's a.
Gotcha.
I'm looking at the hindrances as like mental aspects of consciousness. And if that's true, then they would be one of the aggregates, basically saying they're woven within the aggregates.
Well,
right?
the aggregates, consciousness is one of the aggregates.
Yes.
And so we can get a little bit too analytical, trying to make connections that aren't. They're real connections, but they're not all that significant. So a mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, their consciousness is always reaffirming, they're always reclinging the five clinging aggregates, or you can say that aspect of dependent origination between the sixth and seventh step, it is thinking that keeps clinging and maintaining the aggregates. It keeps the fabrication going. In the same manner, an awakened human being still has that fifth aspect of a clinging aggregate. It's simply no longer clinging, meaning the consciousness aggregate. So now that thinking rooted in right view does not cling itself to aggregates anymore. It's simply an awakened human being. So, and that's the reason why you don't want to get too analytical about this or get too deep trying to make connections when the underlying thread of truth through the Four Noble Truths is enough of a connection to bring us understanding. In other words, if we try to make some that are there but insignificant, we can just get stuck in that. So you have a clear understanding, and it's such an important question, of the five clinging aggregates and the nature of the hindrances. So you can make a statement, and I think maybe to answer this, Michael, because maybe this is where we're going with this, that you could say that the five clinging aggregates as a whole are hindrances, because we're still stuck in that. And so they're reflected, the 5 hindrances are also reflected in each aspect of the aggregates, in the form, feeling, perception, mental fabrication, and ongoing consciousness. It's all included in the 5 clinging aggregates. But one more thing about the clinging aggregates. The 5 clinging aggregates are simply a few words that describe a condition. There's nothing, they have no power of themselves. They have no control over each of us as individuals. It's simply a teaching tool to describe the ongoing personal experience of suffering. That's all the aggregates are. So, all right, good?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to read a little bit more, but what we're getting into is how the actual experience of encountering our hindrances, first on our cushions, and then if there's enough time, we'll get into this a little bit deeper. The first hindrance to establishing a meditation practice is distraction from sensual desire. Distracted by things that appeal to the senses prevents the meditator, us, from being mindful of practice. It's an obvious statement, isn't it? But it needs to be said that this is the beginning of the crux of the matter. This is the beginning of reuniting our mind and our body. In meditation, on our cushions, this seclusion has been established. And I'm all excited about beginning my meditation practice. I've listened to that crazy bald guy. I've talked to all those nice people in the Sangha, and I'm determined to get going. And I got my spot all set out. I've told everybody in the house they got to shut up for 5 minutes, and I'm going to do it. And I sit down. Why did that person say that to me? What's going to happen tomorrow? How am I going to? And it just doesn't stop, does it? Because in this moment, my mind needs to keep maintaining the 5 clinging aggregates that Michael just mentioned. My mind needs to keep maintaining distraction, because I do not want to face the fact that I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't know who I am in relation to the world, and that fills me with fear and dread, and it fills me with ongoing distraction. So my senses, knowing that's my inner conditioning, are conditioned towards continual sensory distraction. Why? Because I created myself that way. I'm the one that reached for a sandwich or a telephone call or a Twitter account or a drink or a golf club, on and on and on, every time I don't want to think about what I'm thinking, every time I need a distraction from what's occurring right now in my life, I use sensory stimulation as that distraction. I think that's clear to everyone. And that is the initial problem on our cushion, isn't it? We sit down, we close our eyes, and immediately our thoughts go to something else. And that something else is driven by sensory desire in one way or another. Even we understand that aversion is still desire. It's wanting something to be different than it is, or not wanting to get something. It's still desire in that. And that's the first thing that we do in our meditation, in our jhana meditation. The next thing we do is the key to everything. When I find myself caught up in sensory desire, when I can't get the thought of tomorrow's Ferrari that I'm picking up at 9:01 a.m., and I can't get that thought out of my mind, what do? Lorna?
Come back to your breath.
You can turn off your mic again. Thank you.
Yeah.
So we come back to our breath. How many times do we have to come back to our breath in this damn practice? It's the key to everything. It's the key to the hindrances, because when we're caught up in our hindrances, notice that. Notice when you're caught up in doubt or ill will or uncertainty, you're probably not breathing very well, are you? If you notice, you'll probably find that your breath has gotten, even if it's just a little bit, it's gotten a little bit more shallow, hasn't it? Matt can probably, if you want to talk about this, please, Matt. When your breath shortens, it's because you're cutting yourself off from your own life, and the practical experience of it is your breath, isn't it? That's why we get that short breath, because we don't want to live life this moment, and it manifests as stress. And one of the common manifestations of stress is you catch your breath. And so we're taught, this amazing human being from 2,600 years ago says, when you can't get out of sensory desire, I'm free of it. Of course, the next moment it's going to come up again, but I know what to do. And this is the foundation. Overcoming this hindrance is the key to all of Dhamma practice. And then we might overcome that one. And in the next moment, I'll read it. Often your mind will want to remain distracted by the many activities of your day. You tell yourself that you are too busy to meditate. Your mind at first may want to avoid meditation. When you meditate despite this common tendency, you begin to gain control of your mind and your life. And that's not a difficult or complicated process, is it? It's what Lorna just described. When we find that we've lost our mind out of sensory desire or ill will or doubt, we take a breath. That is taking control of our mind. And it's the most powerful thing we can ever do to take control of our lives, is to take that breath, but take it with the refined mindfulness and the overarching right view that's developed through the Eightfold Path. In meditation, you may be distracted by an infinite number of craving thoughts. Whatever craving thoughts arise, recognize desire as a distraction. Recognize desire as a distraction. That, and again, that one brilliant line, I wrote it, is, you could say again, the foundation of Dhamma practice. Because in this moment, when I can recognize that it is my desire that's taking me out of my body, out of this moment, out of what's occurring, because in this moment, I need something to be different than it is. I need more of something or less of something, or I'm bored by this particular something. And if I can recognize that, and we can, by being mindful of my breath, or through the refined mindfulness developed through the entire Eightfold Path, then I can do what that just says. I can gain control of my thinking, which is what the Buddha's Dhamma is all about. And it's really not about anything else. It is these hindrances that block us from gaining control of our minds. The Buddha often said, and I'll probably teach this before I'll talk a little bit about the next structure study. But the Buddha often taught that it's much easier to recognize stress and suffering in our bodies than it is in our minds. And why is that? Because what I was going to say is because our minds don't feel. We feel in our bodies. Our minds really don't feel. Our minds react. And they react in such a way that it creates something in our physical body that then gives us a feeling. Is that clear for everyone? So we can be anguished and convince ourselves that we're feeling that. But it goes back to an emotion. The anguish is a thought attached to a feeling. It's a thought that something must be different in this moment that's causing the anguish. And I can separate those two through concentration and mindfulness. I can separate the thought from the feeling, let the feeling be a feeling, let the thought be a thought, which is what the Buddha taught us in week 2. Was everybody's mind going back to the four foundations of mindfulness as I was saying that? Because I'm trying to make that point, this basic point. The problem of the hindrances is overcome through Dhamma practice. And the point that I'm making there is we don't eliminate hindrances before we can develop the Dhamma. The hindrances are part of Dhamma practice. When they arise, we do what Lorna said. We take a breath and we come back in our body. That's it. For most of us, there's more, that's only about 20% through the chapter, but I'm going to let it go because I really want to leave on this mark, on this point. When we learn to curb the 5 hindrances, beginning with sensory desire, this is the one that's easiest seen and probably I don't want to use the word easy, the most direct hindrance, because it's always there. It's sensory desire that's always driving us. You could say that sensory desire is driving the other 4 aggregates, because it takes a certain amount of sensual desire for me to feel ill will, for instance, towards myself or others. I want me to be different, or I want someone else to be different. So it's that sensory desire for difference that created the ill will, and all the rest of them. So when we notice this is arising, and we can do this in very subtle ways, we can create an exercise about ourselves. Look at things that you find are constantly distracting, and for each and every one of us, it's different. but find out what that thing is. What's the one that's distracting you, that's rooted in sensory desire? And don't do anything about it except when it comes up in your mind, take a breath and let it go. That's it. And over time, you're going to find that your biggest distractions will yield to that gentle pressure. Excuse me. And as we work through the obvious sensual desires that are actually just stress inducers, as we work through them, the obvious ones will come up first. But then we get to the much more subtle aspects of sensual desire and how enamored we are with our own thoughts. And that's the thing that we crave the most. It's our own thoughts. Why? Because it's our thoughts that have established ourselves. Forget about it's our thoughts that have established ourselves in ignorance or wisdom. It's our thoughts that have established ourselves. And it's our thoughts that can liberate us from the hindrances. It's our thoughts that can liberate us from our own ignorance. In fact, I would say it's only through our thoughts that we can do this. It goes back to the Eightfold Path and a jhana practice and refined mindfulness. Another way to describe refined mindfulness is simply refined thinking. We've learned how to think. So that's tonight's talk. And actually, I'll conclude. It's 2 talks on hindrances because it's really connected. But this is it. These are the simple things that stops everybody from Dhamma practice. And if at any time we're struggling with our Dhamma practice, and if you look at it a little bit, you'll recognize one, if not all of these hindrances. So let's go around and see what you have to say. I'm going to start at the bottom and see how Tim is doing. How are you, Tim? And I'll let you unmute your mics. Save the confusion.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Yeah, the hindrances very almost like I understand what Michael was saying. It tend to be a little redundant when we discuss dependent origination as they relate to the 5 clinging aggregates, because a lot of them are reactive, and if we practice the Dhamma, we do the Dhamma practice with the Eightfold Path, the 3 factors, and are dispassionate towards them, we won't react to those hindrances. I will say that introspectively, I have I've had in the past, and probably always will have, general anxiety disorder, and so I've always realized that was a hindrance. And hindrances tend to prop up when things get overwhelming, which again, they kind of feed on each other. So taking that breath, getting to your cushion, and what John said, just understanding your quality of mind, recognizing your quality of mind, and even what we said earlier, John, before class, using that self-restraint before action kind of curbs those hindrances. But I understand what Michael was saying. I kind of think that way as well. Maybe I'm not looking at it properly, but they seem a bit redundant. They seem like they can be explained through dependent origination.
You mean the 5 clinging aggregates or the 5 hindrances?
The hindrances, the 5 hindrances, because they're reactionary. Even the ill will part. I mean, there's conditioned thinking in there. They're all in there. And I don't want to overanalyze it, because I do understand through the context of your book and where you put them what they're aimed for. Because when we meditate on our cushion, the fast monkey mind that is full of sensory desires and ill will and anxiety and all those things that we experience throughout the day can prop up. So, I do understand the context, but through looking at it through the Dhamma practice, I can justify those by understanding dependent origination, and when they arise, recognize them and be dispassionate towards them. It's not easy, but that's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah, that's the right view. Dependent origination simply describes what the Buddha awakened to in the result of ignorance of 4 noble truths, and the 5 clinging aggregates describe the personal experience of the results of dependent origination. And so there's not an authentic Dhamma practice that in some way doesn't relate to one, if not all, of the 12 links of dependent origination. So you can always find them there. And again, the 5 clinging aggregates are simply the words used to describe stress and suffering. That's it. Again, so it relates really to the 12th of the 12 link chain of dependencies there. Very great analysis. Thank you, Tim. How are you, Brett? Brett?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
How are you?
Good. Thank you for the teaching. It was good to hear the hindrances and your example on not being able to distractions from your practice. And I think, and putting a label on things and getting stuck in that. And so it was good to hear that. And it was very helpful. Yeah, I think I heard enough, and I definitely took in enough tonight to give me something to work on. So thank you.
Yeah, good. It's good to see you tonight, Brett.
Thanks.
Is that Jen there? How are you, Jen?
Hi, John. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I guess kind of go off of what Tim was saying and to sort of, it is, I mean, the hindrances, the 5 clinging aggregates, the 12 causative links, that all different ways of explaining anatta, resisting impermanence and causing dukkha. And I think what's brilliant about how the Buddha brought to light all of these things is that they're all really saying the same thing. They're just saying it in a slightly different way so that we have all of these tools in our tool belt to recognize when anatta is resisting impermanence and causing dukkha, or when we're being ignorant, or when we are ignorant, or we have ignorant views. So that's kind of my take on it. But I also feel like I like teachings on the hindrances because it is Dhamma practice that's being stopped by the hindrances, but it's also your whole life that's being not lived when you're obstructed by a hindrance.
Yep.
Even if you're not on your cushion. So if you're not on your cushion, you're experiencing doubt and uncertainty or worry and anxiety, you know right away, oh, I'm off the path. So it's really valuable.
Thank you, Jen. You got me thinking about one thing that needs to be said. Talking about these 5 hindrances, we're talking about it, and the teachings are about in relation to the Dhamma. In other words, in the real world, doubt and uncertainty and skepticism is useful sometimes, necessary. But in the Dhamma, within the framework of the Dhamma, it's a hindrance. And that's all that it means. And really I'm saying is that could be some confusion. Someone would, and I've had the question that I had people tell me that they doubted certain aspects of what the Buddha was teaching. And because of the other teachings, not that the Buddha taught, that gave them license to drop it. In other words, I doubt that 4 Noble Truths are true, so I don't need it. I can practice. I can be a chanting Buddhist, and that's my Buddhist practice. That's really why the Buddha included this, because he noticed even during the original Sangha that people would pick and choose things that they wanted to do, and they discard the things that they were doubtful or skeptical about, even though it was a Buddha standing in front of them and teaching it. So that's why I say, just to be clear about that. Doubt and skepticism sometimes is a healthy thing, but not in relation to the Buddhist Dhamma. Thank you, Jen. How are you, Trevor?
Hey there. Thank you, John. Enjoyed the teaching tonight. And I just wanted to ask for your elaboration on this point that refined thinking our thoughts lead us to liberation from suffering. Would you say that connection because our thoughts put us in right view? Is that the main point, or is there something else you had in mind there?
No, it's exactly that, Trevor. Thank you. The Buddha's Dhamma, I mean, it's informed by the first factor of the Eightfold Path, right view, which implies that there's something called wrong view. And a wrong view is a view of self in relation to the world that is lacking understanding of Four Noble Truths, meaning lacking understanding of human life. And so, and that resides in our thinking. And because it does, it means that we can change too. If it wasn't that way, if human beings were just hardwired towards ignorance of Four Noble Truths, we wouldn't be doing anything. There'd be not even a possibility of an awakened human being to teach others. But that's not true. The only thing, and this again relates in a very subtle way to what noble truths mean, that no matter what's occurring, no matter what I believe, no matter what I think, what's true are these four truths, always. And you cannot look at a time in human history, I'm not talking about, in the year 30,000 on the dark side of Pluto, who knows what's going on there. In human life, right here, right now, these are truths. Suffering occurs. Craving for and clinging to ignorance is what sets the whole thing in motion and maintains it. We can get out of this, and the Eightfold Path is the path. Those are the things that are true in relation to the Dhamma. So those are the things that I need to change my thinking about, isn't it? I don't need to change my thinking about the ever, what's that thing called up in the sky? The ozone layer. I don't have to, thinking about the ever enlarging ozone hole, I'm not even saying that right, may be a concern, but it's not a concern to me as far as the Dhamma is concerned. I don't need to think about that in order to awaken. What I do need to think about is framed by the Eightfold Path. So I take my thinking from a wrong view rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, and I develop my thinking to a way of thinking that reflects right view. Is that clear, Trevor?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, again, it's such an important question, but ultimately that's all we're doing is changing the way we think, but in a very specific way. I'm changing the way, when I talk about this, I for some reason I can put myself back into when I was about 13 or 14. And I think that's because that's when most people start becoming much more self-aware in their early to mid-teens. And so for me, 12, 13, 14 was when I started becoming really aware of who I was in relation to the world. And that's when all the confusion set in. It's when I started feeling all the confusion because I wasn't given a foundation to understand what I was thinking and what I was feeling, all the emotions that teenagers have. And so from that point, I started creating a conditioned way of looking at myself in relation to the world that was more a response to the stress that I created in myself. And so I began to further fabricate a self that could fit into this world that was now a world that I didn't know how I fit into it. And I think all of you would relate to them. That's how teenagers believe, don't? That's how we feel. We don't know who we are. And so we start creating a self that we hope fits and will notice and will be successful. But that self is rooted in an initial ignorance of what's really occurring here. And so no matter how wise it might be, go to a good school, whatever the good advice that I follow is only, even if it's good advice, is only building on the fabrication. That's why it doesn't work. That's why I get so excited when young people come to the Sangha, by the way, because the earlier you can understand that I'm the one it's my thinking that's creating so much confusion and disappointment for me. When I was 13 or 14 feeling this way, it wasn't my parents' fault or the school's fault or the priest's fault or the lack of a baseball sky. It was none of that. It was because I wasn't thinking correctly. Of course, a 13 or 14-year-old isn't hardly ever taught to think correctly, but we can be. And then eventually, I was, I think, 114 at the time, but I came across the Buddhist teaching. And the difference from that day to this day is I think differently. That's all. I mean, I'm older. I've done some things. I've done some things I wish I didn't do. There's some things I wish I could do. But the significant difference between me now and me at 13 or 14 is I think differently. That's all. but it's changed everything. And that's what the Buddha teaches. That's why when we get into and fall into fabricated establishments of ourselves, in other words, I do this, I do that, in a future life, I'll get some resolution or freedom or whatever it might be, I've lost my mind again. Because that's not even the problem. The problem when I was 13 or 14 or 23 or 43 or 64 isn't that right here, now, I'm not in that future place. If I'm disturbed right here and right now, it's because I don't understand what's occurring right now. And Siddhartha Gautama said, wait a minute. If you don't understand what's going on right now, I don't want to use the word, it's because you don't understand what's going on. But we can. He taught us the simple and direct eightfold path to understand what's occurring all the time, even when I get so confused that I'm stuck in doubt or sensual desire, or I can't shake ill will or fear or any of the rest of it. All I have to do is talk to Lorna, and she'll tell me to take a breath and bring my mind back in my body. Matt, how are you? Thank you, Trevor. Hello, Matt.
Hey, guys. Hey, everyone. Really, really good talk tonight, John. I wrote some notes about just something that I was thinking about, something that Jen had mentioned with regard to dependent origination, the hindrances, and a little bit of karma and rebirth, what we talked about last class. From contact comes feeling. From feeling comes craving and clinging. From craving and clinging comes further becoming ignorant. So the hindrances in this way relate to becoming. And
in this moment.
In this moment. So if I'm finding myself distracted by thoughts of ill will, or finding myself distracted by thoughts of doubt, or feelings of doubt, or feelings of ill will, that's becoming further ignorant. I'm off the path. I've lost the path. So from contact comes feeling. Now something's happening to me. And when I framed what's happening as happening to me, then hindrances arise. I want it to be different. I want it to be better. I want it to be something that it's not. So that just was something that I heard tonight that I thought was interesting, and it's good to hear from everybody so far.
Thank you, my friend. That was great. Who's this? This is a little dark. I can't read. Who is that? Whoever this is, you gotta know who I'm talking. You're not seeing the same screen. I know who that old man is. Hey, Ram, why don't you unmute yourself? Hello, Ram.
Yep, got it.
There you are. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Sorry about breaking into meditation with whatever I was doing there. I was in the wrong time zone.
Well, I'm glad you joined us tonight.
Yeah. What Jen just said in hooking impermanence into these hindrances struck me pretty good. I've been struck by how I'm just completely glued to the news feed and trying to figure out what's going on around me and all that. And I'm realizing now that I can't handle the impermanence of all this. I can't even handle the impermanence of what I thought my knowledge was of the situation. And I'm constantly running after more knowledge and different knowledge and other opinions. And I'm just dealing with impermanence here. So I guess I'm just going to have to take another breath and let that impermanence just do its thing.
Yeah. So when you hear breaking news, you get distracted.
Oh yeah, completely. And I see something, some new study comes up and some new opinion about how people should be treated and how we should deal with this stuff from society's point of view and scientifically and all that. I'm just trying to deal with the impermanence of this wave that's hitting us now.
Yeah.
And I'm pretending that it's just my intellectual knowledge, intellectual stimulation that's at stake here. Not at all. I can't handle the impermanence of this. Just going to do a little bit more breathing on this.
Yeah, it's much more difficult to regain control of our minds when something like this is going on, especially when there's, almost everyone around, not almost everyone, a lot of people around us have literally lost their minds over and are rooted in fear. And you hear so much contradictory stuff. One person is saying we're all going to be dead tomorrow, and another person is saying there's nothing to worry about, and everything in between. And so what do? What you just said, Ron, you take a breath, get your mind disentangled from the world, and live in peace no matter what's occurring. And the truth of the matter is, when this whole thing started, I guess I first heard about it when everybody else did in January, and I started thinking about it. And by February, I guess I probably had an opinion or two. By March 1st, I knew exactly what had to be done. By the middle of March, I was an absolute expert on everything coronavirus.
Right.
And with all that, nobody's asked me once, what do you want to do about it? And it really doesn't matter, does it? Getting disentangled from the world is an interesting experience, isn't it? Because the things that get the world all excited and all standing on their heads don't affect us anymore, because we've learned, again, I keep going back to Lorna, we've learned when we lose our minds to take a breath, bring our minds back in our body. And what I've noticed the last 4 months since this whole thing happened is it happened. And I haven't had to do anything about it. I'm not taking it lightly. My biggest concern has to do with the clinging to something. I happen to think that we developed something with a lot of problems. I'm not one of those people that think my country right or wrong, but I think this country has done something remarkable in world history, and I think we could very easily lose it now, and that's something I think about. I think that we've established the greatest governmental platform for bringing good to the world, and as a country we do a lot of that. We do a lot of bad things too, but that's the one big concern I have, that somehow this is going to be broken. But then my next, and irreparable, meaning our society. But then my next thought is, like Ram said, that's impermanent too. There's nothing, no matter how noble something is, except hopefully the noble truths, is no reason why they have to become permanent, because they can't become permanent. So even something like the great American experiment. Thank you, Ram. Kevin, how are you?
Doing well there. Thanks very much for this talk. I appreciate it. I think that right now, with all that's going on in the world, everything is changing and everything is sort of from what we used to know as the same. It's not really the same at the moment. And the Dhamma and our practice is one of the few things that we have that still is the same. And this sort of opportunity, or what we're doing here, I think it really gives us a chance to look at these hindrances, because there's not that much going on outside of a few, look, we have our lives and we don't have that many places to go. So the hindrances should be pretty clear, and we should be getting pretty intimate with them. And it's a really internal sort of resistance we need to look at and try and work through. You know, we always say the way is through, and I think really appreciate all of you being online so we can work through this together.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for helping us work through this together. Hello, Helen.
Hello, John. Hello, everyone. I'm sort of thinking about something that Jen said about connecting the hindrances and the dependent origination, and how they were all sort of different ways of saying the same thing, sort of reinforcing it. And I thought about how different people receive information differently. Some people respond to things one way and some people will hear it another way, and how by offering us all of these different ways to absorb it, I thought that was brilliant. And I also thought about something that you said about how what's going on in our mind can affect our bodies, and how I know with my own self I can be carrying a lot of stress if certain events happen, but on the outside I'll appear very calm because I've stored it in my body, and my mind is just, okay, I have to work through this, I have to keep going, I have to make it through the day or whatever. And it won't be until I like check in with my shoulders and kind of unwrap them from around my ears that I'll realize what I'm carrying. So yeah, it kind of all made sense.
It's good. It's good to see you. How about you, Russ? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, John. Just trying to navigate through working life and all the issues of the world at the moment. Concerns, obviously, for everybody that we know and love. But I do really find the teachings tonight and the other nights, sometimes you haven't seen me, but I've been around, helpful. You know, they're very helpful because it's a way to process the information, and also a way to limit the information. Like Ron was saying, I don't need as much as I could get. I need to know enough to be smart, and then I need to go about my life. So anyway, thank you for the teaching tonight.
Yeah, good to see you. Stay with us. I mean, because there's so much out there, it seems like you're almost, I don't know what the right word is. You're not a good citizen if you're not always listening to the news. But, you know, I grew up at a time when you got your world news at 5 o'clock, or the other way around, the local news at 5 o'clock and the world news at 6 o'clock. And that was it. And then maybe 11 o'clock at night at the later news. And that was enough. You know, somehow the world survived with a couple hours of news a day, but 24/7, it's a little hard to take. But that's where restraint comes in. Wise restraint. Just because it's there. I mean, years and years ago, in my house, if you walked into my house, CNN was playing all the time. And I got used to it. You know, I just let it play, and it seemed like the right thing to do. I don't watch that at all anymore because it's gotten pretty bad. But we don't need it. You know, a couple hours a week, and we know what's going on. That's enough. And what's most important, and I like the way I think about this. How's that for being a phrase? I really appreciate the fact that I have a calm mind. I mean, I don't even know how to explain that, but I think you would all understand it. To me, it's the most important thing I own. You know, well, besides Bodhi. But it really is. We've all put a lot of work into this, haven't we? You know, probably more than most things in our lives, I would bet, except, you know, maybe just the hours we put in our job. We've all put in a lot of right effort. And so we should feel pretty good about developing a calm and peaceful mind because we did it. Again, it relates to just what we're doing. What Trevor was talking about, we put in the right effort to change the way we think, and these are the benefits, a calm and peaceful mind. Right, Lorna?
If you say so, John.
Well, what else do you have to say for yourself?
Well, actually, he came up with a phrase that I don't remember you saying before, but you might have done. And it just resonated with me because when I sort of tune into my mind, I can see that there isn't that much going on, but what's going on is very repetitive. It's just, I get like on a hamster wheel, you know, I just go over and over and over and over and over, probably looking at the same situation, but I just, you can almost get yourself on a high, you know, talking to yourself.
Yeah.
It's difficult to explain, but anyway, you used the phrase today that you're picking at your own scabs. And I think that's really quite, it's like my own wound or my own hindrance is that, and I pick at that. When you look at what you're thinking about, that is actually what you're doing. You're picking at your own scabs that you've picked up in life about yourself. So as I say, that little phrase that you used right early on this evening, I think I can see I'm able to use that a lot, I think, in my thinking. And then we don't discuss that when the hindrances arise, is it mainly when we're physically doing something we don't want to do? Meaning you can like trip, what the hindrances do is like you just trip out of life onto another fabrication.
That's right.
So do you tend to do that more when you're actually doing something you don't like? Or is it just going on all the time, but I notice it more when I trip out when I'm doing a physical chore that I don't like doing. I can sort of like trip out and go on a fabrication sort of easier, such as even meditation. It's difficult to meditate. Well, a lot of times it's difficult to meditate. So your mind trips out to avoid meditating. Do you know if you're sort of, if what you're doing physically makes the hindrances sort of more pronounced or lesser, you know?
When you don't want to eat it.
In your context, meditating is doing something physical, right? And so yes, to answer your question, physical activity can often reveal the hindrances, but not necessarily like not necessarily meaning a half hour on a Stairmaster. Anything you're doing within your body, calling it a physical activity, sure will reveal any of the hindrances. That's just the way it is, you know. And I don't want to get too deep into that, but we even know about the physical components of exercising helping with stress too, doesn't it? You know, so there's certainly a physical component to all of this. As Dhamma practitioners, we understand that what we're working with is not just our thinking. We're changing our thinking from a thinking rooted in wrong view to a thinking rooted in right view. And we can use the feelings that are generated in our body through the 4 foundations of mindfulness to notice. And again, it's that initial notice. It's not, I feel bad, where does it come from? I feel this in this moment and I'm distracted by it. Now I'm no longer, you know. Thank you, Lorna. Julia, how are you?
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Very, very good. Thank you very much for the teaching tonight. I wrote a little thing, just a summary of what I understood about the hindrances. I think it kind of almost sounds like what Matt had said. It's similar. At point of contact, we come into contact with the factors of the 5 clinging aggregates. If we do not resolve the issue through right view, it becomes part of our mental fabrications and becomes one of the 5 hindrances. And so it becomes part of like our mind, our background noise in our head. And so when we try to meditate, this busy hindrance is knocking around in there.
Yeah.
When we recognize that our mind has wandered off into the brambles of the hindrances, we must take a breath to create dispassion, and that dispassion creates the space to transcend the hindrance and to experience our mind in equanimity. And that's the important thing. The breath creates the space for dispassion, and so then we can go back on track and back to our jhana meditation. So, like you said, John, take a breath. You know, so that should be the thing that we always repeat to ourselves when we get off track. You know.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie. The way you use dispassion is the right way. Using dispassion as the tool that it is to extricate myself from being entangled in the world is through that dispassion, which is another way of remaining selfless in the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Michael.
Hi, John. Hi, everybody.
Hello, Michael.
I'm right here.
What is it? I can't read it.
I just wrote up all my notes. I just want you to know I'm busy working here on the front lines.
Oh, okay. Okay. How are you, Jane?
No.
I'm just kidding.
I'm going to read them to you. I just want to let you know that I scribbled a lot of things on here, so I was just working last month up to the minute there, trying to put everything in order. Okay. This is what I got out of tonight's discussion. The hindrances can distract us from seeing the aggregates for what they are. They hinder our understanding of impermanence and thus hinder our ability to view the aggregates from right view. From right view, we see the aggregates as they are. They enable us to understand impermanence. As we understand impermanence, disenchantment and dispassion arise, and so settles the mind. For we now know what we are not. We are also letting go of anatta. So our quality of mind, our minds becomes undistracted as we rest in a peaceful state of equanimity.
Sounds good.
Yes or no?
Yes. No. What's wrong with you? I'm going to ask you a question, Michael, but it's for the whole Sangha, but you're on the hot seat right now. How does the 5 clinging aggregates relate to the first noble truth?
The 5 clinging aggregates. Suffering occurs, right? Okay. So with the 5 clinging aggregates, once we understand them for what they are through right view, okay, we obviously, for me, they have taught me impermanence, okay? So if I didn't have this understanding of impermanence, I would be continuously trying to identify, self-identify in an impermanent world. So and that would cause me, stress and suffering.
Excellent. And you see how you related that to the 3 marks of existence.
Yes.
Impermanent.
Yeah. I can go further on the 3 marks of existence because.
No, not really. I just want to get that point. I mean, that's really it. So thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you.
How are you, Jane? Hello, Jane.
How are you? Hi. Okay, well, I enjoyed the talk very much and everybody's responses. And I too took notes. Mine are very succinct. For me, the hindrances, I mean, it all comes back to breathe and be gentle with myself.
Yeah. It does. Thank you, Jane. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Were you finished?
That's it.
Yeah, it really is just that. So let's keep it simple. Thank you, Jane. How are you, Tom?
Good, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciated the sort of the simplicity and directness of the teachings, as I have the last few weeks. I really, I guess, resonated a little bit with what I think Kevin touched upon it, but I super appreciate, I'm so grateful for having the Dharma as that sort of bedrock to fall back on in these difficult times. You know, I do get a bit confused when people are talking about, you know, consciousness with a capital C, and the 5 this and the 3 that and the 12 this and etc. etc. But the core of the teachings, the more I know about it, the more of a clearer understanding I have of it, and the absolute, you know, I don't have any doubt in my mind. It speaks to my I don't know, it speaks to me on a very deep level that is what is most important, and that everything else is, you know, is suffering of different forms formed by not having right views. So that really helps me during this time. It's really that basis of, it gets me through. I still am sleeping quite well, and I'm still, you know, sort of optimistic for the future, because my optimism is grounded on something different to what it would have been grounded on a few years ago. So in that sense, I'm super grateful for the practice. You know, but hindrances, I find that they really come and go. And while one hindrance like doubt is a bit in the background for me at the moment, another one, you know, the central sort of desire or distractions are really you know, will come to the fore. And then yeah, like what Ram was saying about being obsessed with the news, I've been obsessed with it. I'm even obsessed with American politics, and I'm not even from America. I can't vote in your country. You know, it means it's, and yet I've noticed
Greatest show on earth.
Sorry?
The greatest show on earth.
Wow, it certainly is. It's addictive to watch, right? Because it's just one big soap opera, it seems sometimes. But, you know, just like what Ram was saying, like, you can kind of justify it on the level of like, oh, I need to know this, I need to be a well-informed citizen, or whatever. And yet there's something else there. There's, for me, it's a sense of like, there's something that I want to justify my own self by looking at how there's something a bit like, sort of, I don't know if dark is the right word, but there's something like, you know, that I want to sort of, it's like one-upmanship in a sense, right? Of like, oh, that side of the political spectrum is you know, doesn't see things as wisely as I do, and they're, you know, this, that, or the other. And so I have a lot of like clinging to that. And I even watch, you know, these, American, like these, you know, the Saturday night, or sorry, the midweek, you know, all of these John Oliver and the Trevor Noah and all of these political sort of comedy satire shows. And, you know, it's quite funny, and it's still quite interesting, and yet it's built on this, there's so much kind of like us and them about it. And I find it difficult to sort of disconnect myself from that, and because again, that wouldn't be, I'm sure, if the Buddha were to be alive today and he were to be living in the land of you know, of Donald Trump or Boris Johnson, right? He wouldn't be probably making political sort of satire shows and laughing at the opposition, or making them feel bad, right? So I don't know, but I guess on a practical level, I have so I kind of know deep down it's wrong, or it's not, sorry, I know you don't, probably I shouldn't use the word wrong, but it's not.
You can use, no, that's the right word to use. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So it's but I've tried, right? I've tried to disconnect myself from the news, but if it's not the news, it'll be something else. Like, it's that idea of the sensual desires, kind of, you move from one to the other. Is there do you have any sort of practical advice on how to, you know, how to sort of manage sensual desire, like, is there such a thing as saying, okay, I'm going to disconnect from work for a half an hour, and instead of being hooked on the news, is there such a thing as, I don't know, watching something else which is going to help you, it's going to help you decompress or relax, but not, so it's still not, because in an ideal world, I would spend half an hour meditating probably, right? And completely letting go. But in a practical sense, I don't know if I'm capable of doing that like all day and throughout the day. Is there a way of kind of dealing with sensual desire? Is there such a thing as a, still having sensual desires, but relating to them in a more skillful way, or choosing more skillful sensual desires? Is that such a thing, or should you really just be disconnecting yourself and distracting us? Letting go entirely of everything and just meditating and being with your breath.
Yeah, well, you're really talking about the reason why we engage with Dhamma practice. The need for immediate sensual stimulation in this moment only arises is because in this moment I need something to keep me engaged in myself. I need something to keep going to maintain this fabrication that I've called me. And so it's always best ultimately to not do that. But again, this is the brilliance of the Buddha. He designed a Dhamma that meets each and every individual where they are. And so in this moment, and again, this is reflected in the way that I teach people to even start a practice. Start with short periods of meditation, 1, 2, 3 minutes twice a day, and build on that. And while you're doing that, to start integrating the Eightfold Path and learning that. Because to answer your question, how do you get to that point? It's through the Dhamma. But it is through right Dhamma practice, meaning using it the way it was intended. So in the moment, if you find that you can only meditate for 10 minutes and you need another distraction today, take the distraction, even if it's turning on a news channel, if that's the best you can, because it's up to you to realize, I don't need to watch the news 24/7. I don't need to watch the news every day. I don't need to be on Facebook for 12 hours a day. I don't need to do this. What is most important? And to answer your question directly, Tom, is to develop the Dhamma, and none of those other issues will arise, because you'll know. And I'm not trying I'm not trying to obfuscate the answer. I know the answer, and I'm telling you what the answer is. It's through the Dhamma. And so there's no magic here except that it works. Yeah. And we don't have to be entangled in the world. I want to know what's occurring in the world for a few reasons. One is because I live in it. And that, I can say that's the only reason. And because I live in it, it's good for me to know what's occurring in a general way. And so when something arises, we can address it. In other words, if I wasn't paying attention to the world, I'd still be down in Frenchtown right now wondering where the hell all you people are. And how come nobody's here? So there's a value to it, but there's a balance. The Buddha said that he taught the Eightfold Path as a middle way. And one of the most misunderstood teachings, I've never heard anybody yet explain it the way the Buddha meant it. What he meant as a middle way, and it's obvious, it's a middle way between extreme views. It's a balanced view. It's something that allows for everything to occur in the world without me taking any of it personally. And so, again, it gets back to the answer to your question. When I stop taking things personally, there's nothing here that can disturb me. There's nothing that can distract me. So it's through the Dhamma that we develop it. What an important question from all of you. Does anybody else? Well, Tom, did that answer your question?
Yeah, it's really, really helpful. Thank you. I'll try and practice with that this week.
Pardon me? I didn't hear what you said at the end, Tom.
No, I said I'll try and sort of bear that in mind and practice with it this week.
Oh, yeah. And so you hear me always, one of the keys to doing that is to always be gentle with yourself. Yeah. Realize none of us, and I can remember this, and I didn't realize I was doing it all those years I was involved in all the different Buddhist practice. I always created an identity. In other words, when I went up to Zen Mountain Monastery, I was now a member of that Sangha. And so whatever and I loved the man. I still do. Whatever John Laurie taught me, I did, because he was it. And then I took my vows in the Tibetan, and I did all that. That was who I was. But I wasn't learning anything about myself. I became something else, rather than, and this is what the Buddha talks about, becoming anything other than self. I didn't understand that. I thought that meant to be some establishing yourself actually in a non-physical realm. I was just creating more identities about myself. I'm a Zen Buddhist, I'm a Tibetan Buddhist, I'm a specific, and all of it was, I now have an identity to carry around with me, and that's what I was. And so the identity became much more important than actually developing understanding of who I was and letting go of all identities. And again, bringing this back to tonight's class, if I don't have an identity, then a hindrance can't possibly arise. How could it? If I've let go of all fabricated view of myself, there's no identity that's driving me towards sensual desire of needing to get that red Ferrari tomorrow for me to be happy. I'm content with what's occurring right now. When I hear they just found another virus, worse than the coronavirus, and it just escaped Trenton. Okay, take a breath. We do the best we can. And I think we're all doing that. I'm not going to keep, it's gotten late. Maybe we'll have a night to talk about this. Maybe we'll do it over retreat. We really should talk about this as a Sangha. I'm going to find an appropriate short sutta, and let's have a discussion about what this has been like for all of us. So we'll have a class like that in a couple of weeks. I think it'd be good just to get this out. Anybody have anything else they'd like to bring to tonight?
John?
Yes, Tim.
Can you give me 30 seconds? I just wanted to make a comment on a couple things.
Yes, sir.
You know, we all have choices. We talked about this on Saturday, about the choices that we have, the control that we have, the things that we control that are centered around the Eightfold Path, the three factors of the Eightfold Path. And so when it comes to hindrances and the news and social media and all those things, we really do have the choice not to take part in that.
Yeah.
And so if we do get reaction or an agitation from a news program or from what a pundit says, or from what anybody says, that's on us. That's on the person that's reacting. Okay, because from this discussion that we had, the second class on hindrances, I'll speak real quick. We talked about this a little bit on Saturday, and Julia reminded me of this with the term of empathy. And that conditioned thinking develops from the past experiences, justifying in our mind ill will, doubt, and skepticism. And this anxiety is a reaction to the doubts and worries and concerns and skepticism. Conditioned thinking developed through social norms justifies these sensual desires, which again is the hindrance. So in short, the hindrances are roadblocks to right view and the three factors of the Eightfold Path. So I just go back again to what you were saying earlier, is just to be very, very aware of the quality of your mind.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Tim. Again, just to emphasize the point that the quality of my mind is an important thing. It determines how my life is going to unfold. So wonderful class. A few quick announcements. There is now a page called Poems from the Heartwood on our website. It has poems from Michael and Julia and Becky, wonderful poems, and a few of mine. And as you've noticed in these weekly emails, there's been a supplemental sutta just about every week, I think. Have you all been reading the supplemental suttas? You don't tell me the truth anyway. We're gonna do a structured study on those. There's 21 classes that will be part of that study. And as I started, this wasn't my intention in the beginning, but about halfway through, I realized that these other lesser known suttas are really powerful suttas, and in a very subtle way, significant because they're lesser known, but they teach such a powerful message. So I put together a 21 class structure based on those, and we're going to start that on March, and they're on the website now too. I put it up there. The whole study is on the homepage. We're going to start that May the 5th, right after our retreat. So, and I hope everybody's clear that just for practical reasons, if you want to join our retreat, our online retreat, just please send me an email and let me know. And the people that were signed up for the residential retreat, who are now going on a fall retreat, are also I'm going to give them preference to this. But we should have room for at least 6 or 8 more additional people if you weren't signed up for the spring retreat. Does that make sense? And I think that's all the announcements. Anybody else have anything else to say tonight? Okay. The other thing I mentioned it, I think, to Jen and Matt and Ram and Kevin earlier during that radio, maybe not. I was talking to Maura earlier this afternoon. This online Sangha through Zoom, it's really remarkable how our the connection we've made, established through the Dhamma, just comes through this room. I think you all feel that, so it's working pretty well, but I can't wait to get back into Frenchtown to see you all physically. All right, we'll finish with Metta as we always do. Next week's class, you'll read the chapter on the paramitas, and yeah, we'll finish. Just going as I say something else. We'll finish with Metta as we always do. So these are the Buddha's words on Metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. So gently close your eyes, gently close your mouths, and just take a moment to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class tonight. Peace.